It's amazing. We got Alan Guelzo joining us as well. He's a professor of history and an authority on Lincoln at Gettysburg College, and he's from Philadelphia this morning. Nice to see you, Professor. Thanks for being with us. Let's talk a little bit more about the Gettysburg Address, and I'm confident you feel the 8-year-old did well, but Sam's version was fabulous. Tell me a little background on what was going on at the moment that Lincoln was called upon to make this speech.
The Battle of Gettysburg was fought over the first 3 days of July in 1863, and a few days after that battle was over and Lincoln knew what the results were going to be, he spoke at the White House in an informal context, beginning with words that ran something like this. How long ago was it? 80-odd years that the founders created this nation? In other words, he was really already thinking about the Gettysburg Address even before he knew he was going to give the Gettysburg Address. And then, several weeks before the Gettysburg Cemetery dedication takes place in November of 1863, he's already at work very carefully, very fastidiously on creating these dedication remarks that he's going to deliver. You know, the famous story is that he wrote the Gettysburg Address on the back of an envelope while on the train going to Gettysburg, and there's really not a shred of evidence to that. Lincoln was a very careful and cautious literary craftsman. It would have been so utterly unlike Lincoln just to have left something to the spur of the moment. And in fact, when people asked him to speak on the spur of the moment, he usually refused. So when he speaks at Gettysburg, it's the distillation of a long process of thought about what the Battle of Gettysburg has meant and what the Civil War means and what it all means for the future of democracy.
It's a much nicer way to put it, 7 years ago than 80-some-odd years, which is sort of his toss-away line. When you look to the new president, where do you see, from an outsider's perspective, where do you see overlap between the two men?
Well, certainly they're both very talented orators. Lincoln in his day and Obama today are both extremely skilled at communicating. They have a basic difference in that Lincoln, as a practicing lawyer, was always geared toward persuasion, and his major speeches are always the kind of thing you would expect to hear put to a jury. Whereas Obama has been mostly, in his law career, a professor. And so he tends to do more in the way of stating or lecturing or creating a statement that says, this is it, this is what's going to be on the test, and here's the way I see things. Lincoln, as a speaker, was actually very surprising because he was not this rolling orator. He had a very high, piping, almost squeaky voice. And Mr. Obama, of course, is very eloquent, is very beautiful voice to listen to. For Lincoln, however, that high, squeaky voice was very soon forgotten by his of what he had to say. So there are differences, but there are also some compensations there.
You've written a book called Lincoln and Douglas, which is about the debates between, the 7 debates between Abraham Lincoln and Stephen Douglas, and it's called The Debates That Defined America. And you learn a lot from those debates about Abe Lincoln, even though he lost sort of the contest that he was challenging for. It ended up really defining who he was. I'm curious to know, do you think today people would sit for 3 hours through debates like they did then? It was almost feels like it was sport. I mean, they packed a room while they went back and forth for literally hours.
Well, it was a kind of entertainment. This is a day that doesn't have television, it doesn't have radio, it doesn't have any of the things we take for granted as entertainment. And so oratory from politicians tended to fill a lot of that blank. And the oratory that you would get from Stephen A. Douglas and Abraham Lincoln was really oratory of the very highest order. But you know, it was really much more than just political speech, much more than just oratory. It was also a debate about how we make decisions in a democracy, and whether it's just a matter of counting noses or taking polls, or whether democracy is really about deciding what the right thing to do is. That latter was really Lincoln's point.
Alan Guelzo wrote a great book called Lincoln and Douglas, The Debates Defined America. Thank you for joining us. I appreciate it. And we're also going